Well, welcome to Christ Table. My name is Kevin Young. I have the privilege of serving at Christ Table as lead clergy. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, you can visit the URL right there, www.christstable.today. Sign up for the email list there so that you will know everything that's happening around Christ Table. This Bible study is one of the primary things that we do at Christ Table. And if you'd like more information to help you navigate this study, then we have some free materials for you right there at go.christstable.today/divinecomedy. Now, I will say that once you get to that website, we do have a button on there. You can get a box of materials. There is a free curriculum there that goes along every day of this. But if you'd like a printed copy of that study curriculum PDF that's there, you can click on a button that says get the box, and it comes with a printed copy of the curriculum, nicely bound in this book, so that you can follow along with us every single day, as well as some other things as well, in order to help you on your journey as we walk through the wit, the wisdom, the sarcasm, the humor of Jesus on display in the Gospels, oftentimes in many places that you would not expect. Also, one more thing, in case you are not aware of this, if you are struggling with your relationship with the church, with Jesus, with your faith, if you have walked away, considered walking away, know somebody who has, this book may well be perfectly placed in order to help you navigate that and decide where to go next. If you'd like more information about Reconstruct Your Faith, you can visit the URL that's right there in front of me, www.drkevinyoung.com. So let's go ahead and jump into today. We're walking through 28 days. We're looking at Jesus and the things that he said that were humorous in some way, sometimes in a laugh out loud kind of way, like this is really like hit me in the gut funny, and other things that were like, okay, this is humorous, but it's more of a womp womp kind of humor than it is something else. Occasionally there's sarcasm. Jesus is a very good communicator and a very funny guy. Some might even say comedian. And the reason that we don't think of Jesus in that way is, first of all, we're way too serious, and we think of Jesus and God as being way too serious as well, but also because we don't really have great insight oftentimes into the real culture and the language. And because of that language barrier, there are things that are happening there that are leaving Jesus' audience in stitches, and we just don't see it because something is lost in translation. And so we're trying to find some of those things, and a few of the things that we see you will know and recognize because you understand the story and you understand the humor. Others of them may be new, or some of them you might not have thought about it as being humorous in the way that the original hearers would have. So today, on the second day of our study, we are in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5, and we're talking about specks and planks, which for many of us will be a topic, an image that we are maybe a little bit more familiar with than some of the other ones that we'll tackle along through this journey. So Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, don't judge others and you won't be judged. This seems so simple, and yet we do it. And oftentimes I see now people who will defend judging others using other like crazy texts and passages and words out of Jesus' mouth in order to justify their judging others. But don't judge others, Jesus says. Just don't do it. Even if you're allowed to do it, even if there's a reason to do it, you probably shouldn't be doing it, because in the end, you're going to be judged. And usually the type of people who judge other folks have way more things in their account to be judged than the person who they're judging, right? I mean, you know how this goes. Work, relationships, school, friendships, that annoying person who just is always judgy. And if you were to judge them or were to tell publicly all the things that you know, all the dirt that you know on them, you would absolutely destroy them. That doesn't stop them from doing it to you and doing it to other people, but they've got a whole lot more skeletons in their closet, and they're the ones who are pointing out yours and others. I just don't do it. If you don't want to be judged, just don't judge others. Stay away from it. Leave that to God or Granny, right? You don't want that to be you. For you're going to be treated as you treat other people. Whether or not that means God, certainly we see that happening. Like You treat other people like that, other people are going to treat you like that. You don't want that kind of life where you're receiving the treatment of somebody who's always judgmental of other people. Jesus says the standard that you use, the rule or the measure that you use in judging others is the standard by which you will be judged. What Jesus is saying here is, you know what? We talk a lot about God's judgment, and you assume that your standard for judgment is going to be God's standard for judgment, and it's not. Okay? It's not. Honestly, you have no idea what God's standard of judgment is going to be, what he's going to use. So, do you really want to be judged by the same standard that you're judging others? That may be far more harsh than God's going to use. Jesus says, just avoid it. Just stay away from it. And why worry? Why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck out of your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you'll see well enough to deal with a speck in your friend's eye. And a lot of people take this to mean, well, once I get rid of my own logs in my own eyes and I've taken care of those things, once I repent, I'm seeking for, then I can pull out the specks in everyone's eyes. No. There's always going to be a log in your eye. In fact, even the idea that you don't have a log in your eye is a log in your eye. Like, it's just maddening, right? The fact that you even think that you are righteous enough to be able to judge somebody else and to point out something out of them means that you are so far off from what you're supposed to be and can't see it. That's the log. That's the log in your eye. I see this all the time. I can judge others. Jesus is saying here that it's acceptable for me to judge others as long as I have taken care of all of the things in my life. You can't take care of all of the things in your own life. And if you have taken care of all of the own things in your life in order to judge somebody else, then now you have another thing in your life that is not right, that you're being judged for, because Jesus says, don't do it. And so the crowd would have listened to Jesus talk about this speck. And really, again, like yesterday, if you saw yesterday's study on the gnat and the camel, this is a very similar tool of rhetoric and humor that Jesus is using here. Two wildly different sized things that are being made into this comedy of irony and opposites in a way that Jesus usually is using to leverage a point. So speck here is like sawdust, like the tiniest little sliver grain of sand, like the smallest hat, like the littlest. This is what's in view here in this. Is something so small that probably the naked eye can't even see it. It's probably not causing any problems whatsoever in the eye. Even if it's there, it's not causing any problems whatsoever. And yet, on the other hand, we have a log, or some versions will call this a beam. Some versions will call this a plank. You have to think of the largest piece of wood that you can think of. And here, at least in the United States, we don't have any old growth trees that are used in construction anymore because we cut them all down. But you go around the world and look at some of these trees and look at some of these things that are constructed using wood, and it's incredible. So imagine, and this is still not, imagine a telephone pole coming out of your eye and you're trying to pick something out of somebody else's eye. You can't even get close to them with a telephone pole, let alone be able to pick that thing out of it. Think of a sequoia, this huge tree, an oak coming out of your eye. It's blocking your view. You can't see any of it, and yet you're trying to remove something that is inconsequential, that isn't causing any problem in somebody else's eye, while you have this huge issue that's absolutely blinding you and has blinded you. And this would have had Jesus' audience in stitches, imagining this. In fact, I don't know if they had to imagine, because I'm guessing the disciples are probably like up there acting this out. Like you can't stand there in front of a crowd with a pulpit. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own eye? Jesus is out in the community, out on the hillside, out on the road, in the middle of all these people. Listen, He is demonstrating this, and people are laughing at the irony of opposites and just the insanity of this happening. And yet they immediately get the point. It happens every day. Now, the interesting thing, and I want to take an opportunity to point this out here, because what we know about Jesus is that Jesus was a carpenter, right? And so it doesn't actually surprise us at all that Jesus would use wood here, because the thought is that Jesus was very familiar with that. But actually, Jesus may not have actually been a wood worker. Now, clearly growing up in the area, he would have known enough to be able to use illustrations like this from a craftsman perspective. But when we look at the word that's used for Joseph, Joseph was a tekton, which isn't really a carpenter as much as it is an artist, which would have included carpenters and woodworkers, but also many other artists as well. People who created or designed things, either of art or of a functional nature. And so carpenter may have been, but also Joseph could have been some other type of artist or craftsman. Why do I point that out? I point that out because what we know about the area is that whenever Jesus was growing up, Nazareth was less than an hour's walk away from the jewel of Galilee, this city that Herod had been pouring money and resources into in order to make it this jewel. Nazareth, we know, was a very, very small backwoods community, probably only Mary's family. But just down the road is this enormous city of ancient importance that is almost impossible to explain how important this city was because of Herod during that time period. If you look up the name Sepphoris, you're going to find just a wealth of information there from archaeology, from people who have dug into the hillside. In fact, you can even see it right there, the excavations that are taking place. You can go there and visit and walk the streets, see the pillars, many of the fortresses and things are still standing there, and it is an amazing place. And one of the things that make this place so amazing and so unique, and why it's called the Jewel of Galilee, is that more than any other place, maybe outside of Jerusalem in this area, mosaics are everywhere. And if you have never seen like an Eastern mosaic from this time period, from Rome, from Greece, from here in Palestine and in Galilee, it's amazing. The beauty, the intricacy, the art, the amount of time that it took to do these things. And Sepphoris is just, they're everywhere, and they're still being unearthed and uncovered. It was a huge thing. One of the things that history leads us to believe is that it is likely that Mary's mom and dad lived in Sepphoris. So there's a connection not just by proximity, but also a connection there by genealogy to Sepphoris. Because we know that Joseph was a tekton, which includes all different kinds of art, it's possible that Joseph was a tiling expert, mosaics. In fact, the Mona Lisa of Galilee, as it has been dubbed, is here in Sepphoris. Now, this was likely designed and executed well after the life of Jesus when he was here, but there are mosaics that are there from the time period of Jesus that very well Jesus could have worked on, apprenticed to his father there in Sepphoris. Just an amazing thought. And one of the things that we see actually is Jesus using these kinds of images and illustrations as well. In fact, the house that was built upon a foundation of stone rather than sand. And there are other places where Jesus also hints at an understanding equal or more so to that of carpentry. So whether Jesus grew up learning a trade of carpentry or grew up learning a trade of mosaic artistry or some other tecton, what we have here is Jesus drawing upon this idea of craftsmanship and drawing upon this idea of the differences in scale in order to tell a parable about judging others. This parable draws from Jewish wisdom traditions about self-examination. So again, we see Jesus drawing on a history that people would have known, but reframing it in a way that they can understand and that would make sense. The Talmud, for instance, contains similar sayings about examining oneself first. But Jesus doesn't just say examine oneself first. Jesus just essentially says just don't do it. You are not self-aware enough to be able to examine yourself, to fix and take care of all the problems that you have, and then go searching and working on other people and their problems as well. And he calls people who do that hypocrites. The term hypocrite had a very specific connotation in Jewish literature. It's referring oftentimes, almost always, to those who are putting on a religious show. Now, we use the word hypocrite for anyone, right, who puts on a show in one place, but then in the other place, we understand that they're doing something that denies their sainthood in that area. But here in particular, in Jewish literature, the word hypocrite is people who do that for religious show, and is particularly repugnant, frankly, when it is done in religion and in spirituality. Because whenever we do that, we essentially speak or act on behalf of God in containing or harming other people. And drawing on what we talked about yesterday, speak and work on behalf of God in justice. Speak and work on behalf of God in mercy. Speak and work on behalf of God in faith and things that are productive for positive outcomes in other people. But judging other people and pretending to do so with the authority of God, which you don't have, probably something that you should be turning inward and using on yourself as much or more than anything else. And Jesus used comedy to do it, but the truth is that judging other people, though Jesus made his point stick in a very funny way, judging other people, no laughing matter. So if you'd like more information about this study, if you'd like to get the curriculum so that you can follow along with us absolutely free, go ahead and visit that URL right there, go.christstable.today/divinecomedy. Looking forward to being back with you tomorrow as we continue on in day 3 of the study.